All right, we are ready to go on to chapter 20 with the 10 Commandments. And so Moses has been up on the mountain. He's got the proposal from God. He's been up and down the mountain a couple times. He brings a proposal down to the people. And then while Moses is at the bottom of the mountain with the people, God begins to speak to all of them. And that's where we're at with chapter 20. And so let me pick it up at verse 1. And God spoke all these words, saying, I am the Lord your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery. You shall have no other gods before me. You shall not make for yourself a carved image or any likeness of anything that is in heaven above, or that is in the earth beneath, or that is in the water under the earth. You shall not bow down to them or serve them, for I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God, visiting the iniquity of the fathers on the children to the third and the fourth generation of those who hate me, but showing steadfast love to thousands of those who love me and keep my commandments. You shall not take the name of the Lord your God in vain, for the Lord will not hold him guiltless who takes his name in vain. Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the seventh day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. On it you shall not do any work, you or your son or your daughter, your male servant or your female servant, or your livestock, or the sojourner who is within your gates. For in 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth, the sea, and all that is in them, and rested on the seventh day. Therefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and made it holy. Honor your father and your mother, that your days may be long in the land that the Lord your God is giving you. You shall not murder. You shall not commit adultery. You shall not steal. You shall not bear false witness against your neighbor. You shall not covet your neighbor's house. You shall not covet your neighbor's wife, or his male servant, or his female servant, or his ox, or his donkey, or anything that is your neighbor's. Now when all the people saw the thunder and the flashes of lightning and the sound of the trumpet and the mountain smoking, the people were afraid and trembled, and they stood far off and said to Moses, You speak to us, and we will listen. But do not let God speak to us, lest we die. Moses said to the people, Do not fear, for God has come to test you, that the fear of him may be before you, that you may not sin. The people stood far off, while Moses drew near to the thick darkness where God was. This is actually kind of a sad story in a sense, because here God is proposing to the people. And God wants the people to listen to God. And we just saw this tremendous proposal. And the people, they back away. It's like they don't want to be this close to God. And they push Moses forward. Moses, you go talk to him. If we keep talking to him, if he keeps talking to us, we're going to die. And so God is kind of moving in, pressing in, if you will, in this, intimate type moment. And Israel is backing away. No, Moses, you go talk to him. Too much for us. And so it's really kind of sad. I don't know if you've been there to where you've kind of pressed in to get closer to someone, and instead of reciprocating, they're kind of putting up a barrier and pushing you off, pushing you away, trying to get away. Kind of what's happening here. They're grateful, I think a little bit at least, that God has brought them up out of Egypt. But Moses, you go talk to him. God's too much for us. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a quick look at the 10 Commandments and kind of see how they work together. And I think it'll be a little bit interesting. So let me go ahead and chart it out. First thing to think about is, how do the commandments start? And the commandments start with God declaring what God has done for Israel. So this is where they actually start, not with commandment number 1, but there's some context here. So I am the Lord, your God, who brought you out of Egypt. Okay, this is where the commandments start. It doesn't start with commandment number 1. It starts with who God is and what God has done for them. I am the Lord your God who brought you up out of Egypt, out of that land of slavery, out of that bondage. Therefore, the 10 Commandments. Therefore, no other gods. Therefore, no images. And so this is the foundation of the 10. And so if we look at the 10, then we get commandment number 1, no other gods. Commandment number 2, no idols or images. Commandment number 3, no misuse of God's name. Commandment number 4 is to keep Sabbath. And part of the way that you keep Sabbath is you give Sabbath. And then we come over here, and I'll need to tilt this a little bit more. So then we come over here and we get commandments. Number 5, honor parents. Number 6 is don't murder. Number 7 is no adultery. Number 8, no stealing. 9 is no false witness. And then number 10 is no coveting. So maybe instead of don't murder, I should say no murder to kind of keep the same pattern. Okay, so hopefully you can see that. Let me unplug my laptop and kind of slide it over a little bit further. And so maybe it will show up a little bit better. You can kind of see the whole thing. Hopefully that helps. So let me just talk about it for a moment. So again, when we think back here, the opening of the 10 Commandments, I am the Lord your God who brought you up out of Egypt, out of that land of slavery. Therefore, no other gods. I'm the God who rescued you. Therefore, don't make any images. Therefore, don't misuse my name. Therefore, keep the Sabbath and give Sabbath. Therefore, honor your parents. Don't commit murder. Don't commit adultery. Don't steal. Don't bear false witness. No coveting. So you're going to live this way because of what I've done for you. Now, this is what we got to get. Too often, when we think about Old Testament law, we think that they had to do all this in order to get saved. But it's the opposite. They didn't have to live this way down in Egypt in order to get God to save them. No, God saved them, and therefore, because God saved them, this is how they are to live. So this is an act of gratitude to the God who saved them. God saved them, and so this should be their gracious response to live in this way, which would be pleasing to the God who saved them. I saved you, therefore, this is how you are to live. You don't live this way in order to get saved. You live this way because you have been saved. You are saved. So we need to make sure that we get that we have that pretty clear in our understanding. They didn't have to do this to be saved. Rather, God saved them, and therefore, this is how they are to live in gracious response and gratitude to God for salvation. So make sure we get that. Now, let's go ahead, unpack this a little bit further. No other gods. That's pretty clear. They're not to worship the gods of any other nations. They are to be that holy people that is set apart to God, belongs to God, so no other gods. And it's been said that if you keep number 1, you're really going to keep them all. That as long as the Lord God is the only one that you worship and you don't bow down, worship, serve, seek any other gods, you're going to be good. Okay, but number 1, no other gods. Number 2, no idols or images. Okay, this is a little bit different than number 1. This isn't about idols of other gods. This is about making an idol or an image of the Lord in order to try to control the Lord. That's what idols were pretty much used for. They were used to try to tap in to the God that they represented so that you could control or manipulate that God, get what you want from that God. And so the Lord is saying, look, I rescued you. You don't need to control me, and you can't control me. So no images, no idols whereby you would try to manipulate me. Commandment number 3, no taking God's name in vain, no misuse of God's name. This is about more than just, letting a cuss word slip when you stub your toe or something. This is about using God's name to sign off on your agenda. With this coronavirus going on, I've been praying for you guys a lot. And last night, I was really deep in prayer for you guys. And as I was praying, this is what the Lord revealed to me. This is what the Lord told me. The Lord told me to let you guys know that it was His will for you to send me In-N-Out gift cards. No, I'm serious. That as I was deep in prayer, praying for you guys, the Lord told me that it was His will for you that you would send me gift cards to In-N-Out. And man, God is good. Okay, you see what I just did? We do this in all kinds of ways where we use God's name on our agenda. That's what this commandment is all about. Using God to somehow get our agenda done, signing God's name up. It's like committing forgery with God's name. So commandment number 3, no misuse of God's name. Now, I talked a little bit already about commandment number 4, about keeping Sabbath. And so not only are they to keep Sabbath, but they are to give Sabbath. And so you don't work your children, you don't work your servants, you don't work your animals, you don't work those who are sojourning with you. No, that when it's Sabbath, you don't simply take Sabbath, you give Sabbath so that the land, everyone in your household, all the animals, your workers, everybody has rest on that day and is able to spend that day kind of reflecting on God and God's goodness, resting in God's grace and graciousness. Then we come over here. Notice these first 4, they're kind of vertical, although this one they kind of swing us towards the social. But here, 5 through 10, pretty much social. So here you have your vertical commandments, your focus on your relationship with God. And here you have our social commandments, focusing on our main relationships in life. And so it starts with parents, and you can kind of see that, okay, your parents are your first relationship. They're the ones who bring you into the world, and we are to honor them and show them respect and care for them. And notice that this one came with a promise that when we do this, the promise is, or when Israel does this, the promise is that it will go well for them in the land, that they will live long in the land, long lives, so to speak. I don't think this is a promise to where if you do this, you individually will have a long life. Rather, I think it's speaking more about a societal, communal level, that if you have a people that practices this honor, respecting, listening to, caring for their parents, then that respect, that honor will be present throughout society, and that will be a very stable society, and it will be a long-lasting society. But if you have a people that doesn't respect, doesn't care for, doesn't honor their parents, it's like there's not going to be much respect or care or honor anywhere. And the outcome of that will be a very chaotic, turbulent, anarchic society. And that society will not last long. It is ripe to be taken over. And so this honor of your parents, important for the stability of the family, important for the stability of the nation. Next one is no murder. And you can remember the first murder, Cain and Abel. And so it's kind of like honor your parents, don't kill your sibling. The third one, no adultery. And so that's kind of your next relationship typically is marriage. And so don't cheat on your spouse. So honor your parents, don't kill your sibling, don't cheat on your spouse. Your next relationship, is your neighbor, and don't steal from your neighbor. You usually steal from those who are closest to you, so don't steal from your neighbor. And then the next one is don't bear false witness. Don't try to slander somebody else. Don't try to say somebody else did it. And then finally, the last one is no coveting. Now, do you see what's different about the last one? The last one is done in the heart. All the others are outward actions. Okay, but the last one, number 10, it's done in the heart. Okay, I'm feeling kind of guilty here. Maybe it was because of Psalm 51. Maybe it's going through these commandments, but you can't see right now, but I've been wearing these Adidas basketball shoes. I mean, well, I covet Adidas basketball shoes. And the other day I was in the gym and I saw Dr. Anderson, Ted Anderson, playing ball, and man, his shoes looked good. He had these black Adidas with the gray kind of white stripes, reflector stripes at that, and they just look so good. And in my heart, I just wanted them so bad. And I made it through the rest of that day, but that night I just thought about those shoes all night long. It's like, man, I just had to have them, even the reflector tongue. And I thought, wow, I want those shoes. And, you know, I saw Ted and I told him that, you know, God had told me that he was supposed to give me those shoes, that God wanted me to have these shoes. And I don't know why, but he didn't listen to me. He didn't believe me. And I knew God wanted me to have these. And so what I ended up doing was, well, I took them. And you probably noticed that you haven't heard much from Dr. Anderson. He hasn't been out playing basketball much. And, you know, I don't know if you saw the news report, but there was this kind of shoeless basketball player that was discovered down on the cliffs. I don't know how that happened, but I'm grateful. I know God wanted me to have these shoes, and so I have them. And everybody was kind of, you know, thinking that maybe I did something to Dr. Anderson to get, you know, these shoes. And they asked me, you know, have you seen Ted lately? And I said, what? Am I my brother's keeper? I don't know where he's at. And then all the evidence started to kind of point to me that I had physically harmed, killed Dr. Anderson in order to get these shoes. And but I said it wasn't me. I didn't do it. I said you know, I knew what happened, that it was actually Dr. Mark Mann who killed Ted, and Mark, for whatever reason, gave me Ted's shoes. And I didn't ask any questions. I just, wow, Mark, thank you. You're a good guy. Well, Mark had an alibi. He wasn't even in town at the time that Ted became missing. And so everything started to point more and more back to me. And finally, when everyone was asking me about it, I just was honest with them. And I just said, look, you know, I was praying and God told me that these shoes God wanted me to have. And I talked to Ted about it and he didn't believe me. But look, God told me that these shoes should be mine. And so I did what I had to do to get these shoes. And man, they are nice shoes. Okay, you get it? By the way, Ted's alive and well. But hopefully you kind of get the picture that when we break number 10, when we covet, we covet long enough, we don't just break number 10. That it's going to show up in all kinds of places. And actually, I did this on the Sabbath day. No, so it's going to show up in all kinds of places. It's going to show up in stealing. It's going to show up in bearing false witness, accusing someone else of doing it. It could show up in murder or violence, whether it's physical violence or verbal violence. It can show up in cheating in all kinds of ways, dishonoring. It's going to show up in using God's name for our agenda, even worshiping other gods, the god of greed. And so what I want you to see is that the commandments are interrelated. And especially number 10, if it's going on in your heart, it's going to come out in other places. And again, I kind of think back to Psalm 51 and what was going on in David's heart. It all started when he saw, when he coveted, when he wanted to know, who is that woman? And he found out that she belonged to someone else, and he still wanted her, that she was married to someone else, still wanted her. And so he took her, and then he took that man's life, and he thought he had pulled it off. But no, it always comes to light. It always blows up. So takeaway, kind of reflect on these commandments. If you keep number 10, you're going to keep them all. Keep number 1, you're going to keep them all. But if you break number 10 or you break number 1, watch out, because there's going to be a lot of other ones broken as well. Well, that will do it for this session. And again, I would challenge you to talk to someone about the 10 Commandments, kind of how they're laid out, how they work together. And kind of going back to Exodus 19, these are the commandments that they are to keep. That if they practice this way of life, if they live out these commandments, then their character will conform to God's character. They will be a people set apart to God, marked by his presence, living in a way that fits with who God is. And so they'll be able to play that priestly role. They'll be able to bless, they'll be able to teach, they'll be able to bring the needs of the nations before God. And so this is what covenant obedience will look like. And so if they listen, if they live this way, then they become that most treasured people that God is able to use to reach all peoples, to bless all peoples. All right, well, that will do it. And next time we'll move forward on into Exodus. Thanks for your attention. Hope you have a great day, and tell someone about the 10.